Hey there, future educators. Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled to be stepping in as your instructional coach today. We're going to jump right in and unpack an absolutely essential piece of your future teaching toolkit, Competency 002L, which focuses on music management. Look, whether you're aiming to teach elementary general music, middle school band, or high school choir, your success, and really your students' success, completely hinges on how well you manage your environment. We aren't just talking about keeping kids quiet here. We are talking about engineering a space where maximum musical learning can actually happen. So, picture this. It's a very real classroom moment. The bell rings and 30 super energetic fourth graders come rushing into your music room. Right at the front, they spot a massive pile of tambourines, rhythm sticks, and hand drums. They are so excited to play. But if you don't have a plan, well, what happens? Distributing those instruments instantly turns into a chaotic mess instead of a musical beginning. You end up spending 10 minutes just trying to get the right sticks to the right students, breaking up little arguments and practically begging for quiet. Guys, that's 10 minutes of lost instructional time. Why does this matter so much? Because your ultimate goal is to teach music, and you literally cannot do that if you're constantly battling your own lack of systems. This perfectly illustrates exactly why we're looking at this today. We're comparing a room that bleeds instructional time to an environment that is totally dialed in on active music making. Think about the stark difference here. In a disorganized room, your energy is completely drained by logistics. But in a well-managed room, where procedures are practiced and crystal clear, students walk in, they know exactly how to safely grab their instruments, and they are ready to play within 60 seconds. It's honestly the difference between just surviving your first year of teaching and actually thriving as an educator who facilitates real, joyful music creation. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the classroom reality, move on to defining the core concepts, look at some actionable classroom application, reflect on your choices, and finally, hit the big takeaways for the exam. Section 2, Defining the Core Concepts. Let's get into it. Let's start by unpacking the academic language you're going to see on your certification exam and translating it into practical, everyday teacher terms. You need to know this stuff not just to pass the test, but to communicate like a pro with your future colleagues and administration. First up, instructional resources. Now, in a traditional classroom, this might just mean textbooks and pencils. But in your music room, these are the instruments, the sheet music, the smartboards, the music stands, basically all the physical materials that make learning tangible. Think about a classroom set of ukuleles, right? They're expensive, they're fragile. How you store them, how you hand them out, and how students put them away, those are all absolutely critical management decisions that directly impact how long those resources last and how well they support student learning. Next up is transition. This simply means the movement from one activity to another. And let me tell you, this is the danger zone in any classroom. It's that critical moment when, say, your students need to put away their recorders and move over to the choir risers, or switch from a listening exercise to a movement activity. If you haven't planned that transition out, you leave a vacuum. And guess what? Students will immediately fill that vacuum with chatter and off-task behavior. Mastering transitions is all about keeping the momentum of the lesson going so that not a single minute of learning gets wasted. Finally, we have your learning environment. This encompasses both the physical space you set up and the instructional vibe you create where learning actually happens. It's the physical layout for sure, like are the chairs arranged so you have clear sight lines to every single student? Are the pathways clear so they can move around safely? But it's also the overall atmosphere of respect, routine, and readiness. A well-organized physical space creates this incredible sense of safety and predictability, which is absolutely essential if you want students to feel comfortable taking creative risks with their music. Moving on to Section 3, Actionable Classroom Application. Okay, time to bridge the gap between just knowing the vocabulary and actually standing in front of a room full of kids. Descriptor L of your competency explicitly states that you must manage time, resources, and physical space effectively for music education. Basically, this is the state telling you, point blank, that your content knowledge in music theory or history just isn't enough on its own. You could be a literal master musician, but if you can't manage the space and the time, your students won't benefit from your expertise at all. Beginning teachers often struggle right here, because they focus entirely on the lesson plan and they completely forget to plan the logistics. Let's look at how this builds into actionable procedures. Your classroom has to have established routines for these exact 4 steps to make sure you maximize instructional time. Let's visualize it. First, distributing instruments. Maybe instead of 30 kids rushing the front, you assign row captains who fetch the bins for their section. Second, transitioning. Maybe you play a specific 4-bar melody on the piano that signals students to stand up and point their toes toward the next station. Third,
Preparing for performances requires you to know exactly how students get on and off those risers without a major traffic jam. And finally, storing materials might mean color-coding your sheet music folders so kids can return them independently in like 5 seconds. When you script these procedures out in advance, you're building a machine that practically runs itself, freeing you up to actually, teach.
Section 4. Reflecting on your choices. As your coach today, I really want to pause here. I want you to visualize yourself standing at the front of your very own music room. You've got the keys, you've got the lesson plan, and your students are arriving in exactly 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what specific instructional decisions will you make to organize your physical space so that every single student has more time for active music making? What would you actually do in a situation where a student drops a delicate instrument because the pathway to the storage closet is just too cluttered? How might your students respond if your transition from singing to dancing is totally seamless and fun rather than confusing and loud? How could establishing a visual timer on your smartboard support diverse learners who need clear expectations of how long an activity will last? Because honestly, your instructional decisions in these logistical areas are exactly what determine how much actual participation your students get to experience.
And finally, Section 5, Takeaways for the Exam.
Let's wrap up our coaching session by focusing directly on what you need to master for your certification exam. Remember, the exam isn't trying to trick you. It's just trying to make sure you have the mindset of an effective, proactive educator. So, you absolutely must remember these 3 takeaways. First, effective management supports learning. They aren't separate things. Management is the soil where learning actually grows. Second, your resources, time, materials, and space must be organized efficiently. If a test question gives you a scenario about lost time, the correct answer will almost always point back to better organization. And third, well-managed rooms always maximize student participation. If you're ever stuck on a multiple-choice question, look for the choice that results in students doing more active musical learning because the teacher proactively removed the logistical barriers.
We'll end today with this guiding principle straight from the standard itself. Everything you do as a teacher should serve the goal of supporting student learning. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to take into your student teaching and beyond. How will you intentionally apply this competency so your future students spend their precious time creating, playing, and experiencing the absolute joy of music, rather than just standing around waiting for instructions? Think on that, plan for it, and you'll be well on your way to becoming an incredible music educator. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and happy teaching.